How can I pick up a new skill? How can I practice martial arts and self-defense during quarantine? How do I know if I'm practicing my form correctly when I have no partners to critique my learning? And flat out, just how do I throw a punch properly? Today we're going to be answering all of these questions and learning more about why exactly, looking at them more in depth. My name is Junior Instructor Ramirez, and this is Self-Mastery. So today we're going to be talking about how to properly study on your own during quarantine and how to actually get effective training when you have no... One second. All right. How to effectively train on your own and how to practice your form and how to better your form. How do you even know if you're bettering your form during this self-quarantine when you have no people to go off of, no people to ask, no higher rank to know whether or not you're executing the form properly or not? Well, my self-masters, the short answer is it's really hard to do that kind of actually. But the long answer is I came up with an 8-step method that I call WHITNESS with an H. And that stands for what and why, have a first go trying the technique, imagine your opponent, take a minute to review the model footage, now analyze micro movements from the model footage to get a second layer of understanding. Exercise the technique again, but this time with technical stuff in mind. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And lastly, search for crispness. I'm going to break down and lay out my method first, and then I'm going to basically teach you how to throw a punch, and we're going to use what we just learned to try to analyze the punching, the technique of punching. So if you just want to skip to learning how to punch right now, just skip to this time right here. That's right over my face probably, and you can go there right now. For those of you who are here, want to learn kind of the method of how to apply it to learning something, anything, by the way, we're going to be learning how to apply it to any sort of video. The goal is to be able to take this method and be able to apply it to learning any sort of martial arts technique from any type of video, be it Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, anything. The idea is to understand how to learn, express, break down, and then essentially master it to the best of your abilities that you're going to be able to do during quarantine, which I think is like pretty good chance that you're going to be able to do that, I think. But yeah, beyond that, let's go into the technique breakdown right now. So my method that I've come up with is an 8-part method that I call WHITNESS with an H. So our first letter is W for what and why. What and why really applies to anything in any step of any method, I think, of anything, learning anything at all, ever, is to understand exactly what it is that you're trying to learn and why it is that they're teaching it this way. Why do I use this method and not this method? Why do I do these things? The reason why that's so important, you see what I did there, is because if you have a good conceptual understanding of why we do things, then your mind can be smart enough to figure out how to solve your own problems when there's no one else there to help you. And that's just in case, say, a video is 35 seconds long and you didn't even know how much information you can get from there. A lot of it is up to the instructor, the video instructor, but a lot of it still can be overcome by you understanding conceptually why something is written or made to be the way that it is. For example, let's look at a fist. There is a proper way to form a fist and there is an improper way to form a fist. The proper way we form a fist is we take a hand, we close up our fingers, ball it up, and then we put our thumb over. The part of the fist that we hit with are these two knuckles, the first two. The reason why is because if we punch with these two knuckles, the second two, you can see these are a lot more thin and fragile and they're more susceptible to breaking when you punch something. So you can surmise that these are the ones that are hard, and that's why I'm going to punch with these guys. Also, there are fewer nerve endings and blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. Now, I didn't tell you that you don't need to punch with these knuckles or these knuckles. But that kind of goes without saying. Why? Is because if you understand that the reason that we punch with these knuckles is for the sake of making sure that our structure is strong and we're punching with the hardest parts of our body, then you can probably figure out on your own not to punch with these knuckles ever. And that's cool. Now, secondly, I hope that you were probably able to figure out that we shouldn't probably bend our wrist ever. We're not going to hit with this part of our fist or this part of our fist or our wrist ever. We want to keep our wrist straight, which means that if you can, use what we just learned, if we're punching somebody who's way taller than us, we might remember and say, oh, dang, Mr. Ramirez told me not to punch with these knuckles. So when I punch him and he's high, I'm going to go like this, boom, because he's taller than me. I have to punch. If you can see me reaching up and punching. So me reaching and punching like that, that's not good because I've broken my structure. I want to make it so that my structure of my fist is essentially one giant pole with a ball at the end of it. Mr. Parker famously named it a mace. So in all of our Kempo techniques, we see them as called something the mace, something maces, blah, 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 mace. Because a mace is basically that old medieval weapon that was a stick with a giant sledge at the end of it that probably had, pointy spikes or something, or it could just be a ball, just anything, it's a stick with a ball at the end of it. It looks pretty much like a mace. So I can mace somebody this way, I can mace somebody this way, I can mace somebody this way. You can even mace somebody if you figure out that, hey, we're hitting using hard parts of our arms, of our hands, then that means I could probably hit with this part, which is true. That's a different kind of punch. It's called a back knuckle. Now, if I'm punching with this, then hey, that's what we're doing. We're making a fist, and that's why. Another one, as an example, is what are we doing punching? Well, punching somebody is a way of hurting them, and we probably get hurting them because we're trying to protect ourselves, and it's a method of self-defense. So also learn what you're doing. You're punching somebody to hurt them. We also learned what not to do. Don't punch somebody on this part right here. Is one of the hardest places of the human body, these teeth. These teeth have roots that go up all the way into here. If you punch here, you're gonna really, really probably break your hand. I don't even care what knuckles you're using, it's gonna hurt. Also, probably don't punch somebody in the front of the head. Side of the head is questionable. If you get right here on the temple, that's nice and good. There's a soft spot of the head, soft part of the head, of the skull. Or the jaw, this is pretty loose. You can hit them there. Or the nose. But really try to avoid hitting in the forehead or here. Again, you can punch to the sternum, you can punch to the neck, and you have to understand what that means. That means you can risk somebody passing away if you hit somebody in the neck hard enough. So understand what level of seriousness it is. You can't just go around punching people wherever. There's a what and there's a why. Solar plexus is a great place to punch someone. Groin is probably the best place to hit anyone, ladies and guys. My instructor, Mr. West, always used to say this pretty good lesson is there's no person that you would hit in the groin and they don't go, oh. And if you ever hit somebody in the groin and they just go like this, run. That was the joke he always used to tell me. So, and I think it's pretty accurate. Groin, just for anybody, it's a good place. So, places to punch. How, what is it? We're punching. What are we doing? Blah, blah, blah. We get it. That's why. And we learned why. So that's W. Our next guy is H, and that just stands for have a first go at trying the technique. There's no real rhyme or reason to what you need to be thinking about. You just need to start trying to get the movement ingrained in your body. And then you'll discover your own things on the way. You'll discover whether it's what feels funky, what feels hard to you. Maybe you have had balance issues before, and this is a technique that requires lots of balance. In terms of punching, it's not really that complicated, but there are some things to keep in mind. But yeah, have a first go at it. Just stand in the air and try it 20 times on each side. So do it 20 times on this side, 20 times on this side. I would like to say do 10 on this side, do 10 on the other side, and then revisit the old side, and then you'll get more learning after doing it on both sides. You learn what different parts of your body like to do and what your habits are. But yeah, basically H is just have a first go at trying your desired movements of any technique. In our case, it's just doing a punch. The next guy is I, is do it again and imagine your opponent and focus on the parts of the movements that you find necessary in order to effectively execute whatever it is that you're trying to do. Right now, when you were just doing it in the air, you were just seeing how your body reacts to this new sort of movement that you're doing, this dance move. But now when you're understanding of thinking in your head, imaginarily, trying to visualize how you're going to apply it if it were a real person, now your brain is doing a second sort of sweep of what it is that you're doing. You're now recollecting that movement and now seeing it practically from a different perspective. So that's basically what I is. Try to imagine an opponent, imagine how high they are. We usually say, we usually say, to imagine someone who's exactly your same height, exactly your same bone density, literally you. That's why we practice in the mirror. So if you have a mirror, great. Look in the mirror, practice hitting yourself in the nose in the mirror. You don't want to practice too much hitting a guy too much higher than you, too much hitting a guy who's gonna be shorter than you, or girl. I don't know, ladies, whoever you need to punch, just make sure that make sure it was well justified. But yes, so I imagine your opponent. So you're imagining your opponent. In our case, it's just a fist. We're imagining me hitting him in the nose, or me hitting him in the solar plexus. The solar plexus is your the solar plexus is this part where your ribs meet. That's called your sternum. The first place where your ribs are not hard anymore, it's like soft, is your solar plexus, and it's right above this smooth muscle called the diaphragm. If you punch somebody right there, it's really, really hard to fight against that. There's not a lot of protection. It's in that little piece of tendon where your abs are right on the outside of it. So you hit somebody there, you can knock the wind out of basically even a big dude if you hit him right. Or gal. The next one is T, take a minute to go back and review the video footage or pictures. Sometimes people are getting it out of books. It's fine to get it out of books. Books really, really help. And a lot of the times the books will do a good job at explaining and describing the stuff that I'm doing right now in this video about where your feet should be and blah, 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 X, Y, Z, etc. When we're considering taking a minute and reviewing, the goal is just to review all the stuff in slow motion now a second time, but really, really just compare what they're doing to what you're doing. Because right now you just looked at it and you tried it. Then you kind of imagined it doing it on a person, and now you're gonna go back to the footage, but now review it slower than you did before and just see if what you're doing is drastically different. Try to get what you're doing to be reasonably close to the same thing. But don't be too crazy on that, too crazy hard on yourself quite yet, because that's the next step. The next step after that is even further, is to now, after having reviewed the footage, review it again, but now analyze those tiny, tiny micro movements that you probably didn't see the first time or the second time. But now you'll notice things like, oh, his hips kind of get there sooner, his hips turn sooner than his foot turns, or something like that. Or notice how his shoulder is in sync with his hip, or whatever. Or when does he form a fist? Or what is his other hand doing? His other hand goes up here, and that has nothing to do necessarily with throwing a punch, but it's good for having good form. You want to have a fist up to protect your face. But yeah, you may see things like, oh, now his fist, is blah, 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 X, Y, Z. So yes, so your job now is to now analyze those tiny, tiny micro movements to get a second layer of understanding of actually what this technique is. Not just your first initial application, but this is really where the form perfecting comes from. Is you had a general idea, a big kind of blurry idea of what the form is supposed to look like, the form of any technique, be it throwing a punch or throwing a kick, or doing some crazy technique like, circling windmills. Kempo guys know why that's funny. Whatever the form is, you have a broad, general, blurry understanding, and now we're just trying to kind of do what they do in the movies where they go, oh, open that, enhance, zoom in, enhance. And that's what we're doing right now with our head and our understanding of the form. So go back, you have footage, you have stuff, really, really micro analyze those tiny, tiny things that the video instructor may or may not have time to break down and give them for you. you're probably going to get one video and you won't have anyone to go off of to tell you whether you're doing it right or what specific habits you're building that are good or bad habits. Which is why from the one video, be able to suck more and more knowledge out of it each consequential time that you do it again. The next step is to exercise the technique again, but now this time with those broken down smaller parts in mind while you had that. So before we were just imagining our opponent broadly, now we actually analyzed some footage, got some more information from the footage, and now we're going to do that technique that we had already been practicing. We'd already been trying it, you know, for a little while now. And now we're going to take that and try to refine using those tiny ideas and concepts that will help allow us to formulate to do the thing that we wanted to do in the first place. So if your job is to throw a good punch, your job shouldn't be to make your punch just look good. Your job is to make the punch do its job, which is to hurt the thing that you're punching and not hurt you. So this time now you're having a refined understanding of what you're doing. Whether or not you had anyone to try to tell you what it is, because the idea is if you understand why you're doing what you're doing, you should be able to figure out what it is that you need to do in order to get better. To the best of your abilities. It's not going to be perfect, okay? But that's kind of the consensus here is we're not working with the perfect stuff. In a perfect world, you would be in front of a teacher. In a perfect world, we'd be in classes and not have to wear masks. So yeah, you want to keep key things in mind in case the instructor didn't give you this information to look at. These are just some of my personal tips on the things that you can keep in mind when you are trying to have a more broken down understanding of your technique while you're executing it. So these things that you can keep in mind are things like targets, the structure of your body, the structure of formulating a fist, etc., weight distribution, your timing, which muscle groups you're engaging. You might not know, but there's a lot of butt cheek muscle in throwing a punch. And when you feel that your butt cheek is engaged, your whole body is engaged in throwing a punch, then you can isolate which muscle groups you want to practice with and just doing one simple form, one simple technique. Do it 20 times using different muscle groups in mind. And lastly, another one that I mention often is penetration, or what we can consider energy transfer. We call it penetration because it has to do with something, not just making contact, but penetrating through that whatever contact point and making some penetrative impact into the contact point. So when your fist touches something, you don't want the fist to just come up to the face and touch it. It's not going to hurt. Doesn't matter how fast you throw the fist. The fist, in order to transfer the energy, that the pain of the fist hitting someone's face, it needs to go into the person's face, and thus the wave of energy will be transferred into the human, into the person. Or if you're punching a pillow or punching, you know, whatever, a piñata. So you're punching someone, don't just go to, but go through. And so you focus on energy transfer, not just in one point, not just the fist, but sometimes whole body, sometimes whole lots of things. So something to keep in mind is energy transfer. Fist making contact and fist penetrating through its impact point. Then, this is one of my favorite ones. One of my instructors by the name of Bry Cooper always used to tell me, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Basically, what that means is, the way I understood it at least, is to understand, to try to do everything as slowly and as precisely as you possibly can. If you work on slowness, if you can master slowness, it's actually really hard to go slow. It's really hard to do anything slow, like that slow. Bodies just don't do that. They're not meant to do things that slow. Doing a kick slow, doing anything slow, it's work. If you can do something slow enough, cleanly, you can start connecting those movements smoothly. Right now, a punch is not that complicated, but when we're talking about, you know, a 1-2 combination or 1-2-3 combination, boom, 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 then it starts getting a little bit more complicated. And the idea is to take that slowness, clean it, and then transfer it into smoothness. And then from smoothness, the speed will just naturally come along. And so based off of this concept, I'm paraphrasing of course, but I think it was Ed Parker that said, mainly to focus on fluidity and accuracy, then speed. Power will come later. And of course, slow, smooth, smooth is fast. I'm going to keep this in the same section. Work with various timings. Work with various timings. All different kinds of timings. As many different kinds of timings as you can possibly think of. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. All that kind of stuff. Do that like until the cows come home. Do it until your head is inside out and backwards. Until you're doing it in Spanish. I don't care. And then lastly, the easiest one, really the hardest one, the simplest one, is search for crispness. That's kind of the real last level of mastery. Is if you took a technique that you didn't have any idea how to do from the beginning, you went through all these steps, tried to master it, make it better, and practice, and you can seemingly do it pretty clean, crisp, and it looks the same every time, and you've tried to identify as many habits as you could find and get rid of them, and you're pretty consistent with how you do it, with your speed. You can change your speed. These are all signs that you're crisp. Is mainly consistency. And if you can do it crisp, you can do it fast and clean, and hopefully you won't really have much place or time to practice this or know if you have this, but you want to understand that you have power in your technique as well. Try with anything that you can, pillows, a bed, a couch, anything, your brother if they let you, you know. Yeah, try to focus on crispness. When you can get that, then you could say, hey, I think I feel comfortable enough that I've been working on this technique long enough that I think I can do it. I have a basic understanding, an intermediate understanding, maybe. Hopefully it won't take that long with a punch, but you never know. Everyone starts from a different place. Cool, and that was basically my breakdown of W.H.I.T.N.E.S.S, WHITNESS. Why are you saying it like that? It's pronounced whiskey. So with that being said, let's go into learning how to throw a punch, and let's see if you can take this analysis and if we can apply it and break down how to throw a punch. Cool. All right, so we're learning how to throw a punch. Let's start with talking about how to make a fist. You're gonna take your hand, close your fingers all the way, and then put this thumb over it like that. You want to make sure that your thumb is over it like this and not like this, because you can risk it getting caught onto something, maybe like a sleeve. You don't want to break your thumb. You also don't want to have your thumb on the inside, because when you punch, you're going to risk taking all that pressure on your thumb and breaking your thumb. When we talk about formulating your wrist, you want to make sure that it's structured very, very flat and straight. You don't want to have it bent like this or bent like this. We're not hitting with this part. We're not hitting with this part. We're hitting with these two knuckles, these front two. These two knuckles are the hardest knuckles on your fist. The other two, you can move them a lot and very easily, and you risk them getting broken or really, really hurt. You're still gonna hurt, you may hurt your finger, these knuckles, no matter what you punch. You're punching anything. If you're punching anything hard, you risk damaging yourself. The idea is you want to be able to practice using your weapons well enough so that you don't really take on so much damage. If you're formulating the punch correctly, the idea is it's supposed to hurt them more than it hurts you. But again, we're using this for self-defense only. So keep your fists stiff, practice making sure that your wrist is straight, and we're punching with these two knuckles. I like to teach the punch like this, vertically, as opposed to horizontally, because if I punch up, I risk hitting with these knuckles. That should go without saying. We're not hitting with those because those can break too. If I punch like this, it doesn't matter which height that I'm choosing. I'm always going to be able to hit with these knuckles. If I punch up and I'm doing it, horizontally, I don't want to turn my wrist so that I punch with these two knuckles still, because now I've broken my structure. So that's how we form a fist. We're going to stop right there, and because now there's a tractor. Are we good? Cool. So let's talk about how to throw the punch, and then we're going to talk about where to throw the punch. So first, we're going to start with a reverse punch, which is the backhand fist. You're going to start in the stance a little bit sideways, not all the way sideways. Here I eliminate a few targets. I want to be a little bit sideways so that I have equal reach. I'm not kind of crossing over myself. So I'm going to start in the stance just like this. I'm going to take this fist that we learned how to make earlier, and I'm going to just extend it all the way. But if I don't rotate my body, you're going to see we run into a problem really quickly. The problem is that this hand is a lot longer than this hand. This one has more reach. So if I want to be able to reach with this backhand over here, I have to rotate my hips. That's cool, but I also should rotate my foot. When I do that, my arms become, basically they're the same length. And I have just as much reach, but I'm still punching from a sideways stance, which allows me more stability. And basically we're learning how boxers throw it, more or less. So we're gonna take this fist and I'm gonna reach out and point it. But we're gonna learn very quickly that the power is not generated from your arm or your tricep straightening your arm. That the power is rather generated from your tricep, your bicep, your whatever this muscle is called, all your entire body is moving in to your target. Your either their solar plexus, their throat, their nose, their face, whatever you're trying to punch. So, or a pillow, you know, if your target is a pillow, whatever. So we're gonna start here and we're gonna reach out and turn and reach all the way. I teach to keep your heel down so that you can maintain stability even while you're punching, so that way you can punch a big giant person or a giant pillow, and you won't lose your stability. You won't get this feeling like you need to support yourself entirely with your muscles. Here, I'm supported by my bone structure as opposed to my muscles. Here, I'm supported by my muscles. This is still good because I could push off. So there's neither one better way or the other. They're both equally as fine. But essentially, yeah, I'm going from here and turning. So really fast, I want to make sure that you can notice that it's all happening at the same time. So, you know, like this, move. Reaching out and coming back. This foot doesn't move. This one turns. So as I throw this punch, you want to make sure it goes out and it comes back in even faster than it went out. Play with different timings, of course, like we talked about already. So I'm going out and coming back. This hand, I mean, if you're really caring about it for fighting purposes, I say keep it up by your face. But we're not talking about, you know, all this kind of fighting application today. We're just talking about how to throw this punch. So stick it out, pull it back. One more time. Turn, rotate your entire body, make sure your hips are square off, and then unrotate your hips so that they're sideways again. So they're only rotated all the way when we get here. Now remember, you want to keep your body relaxed the entire time. So practice this slowly. Relax, 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 breathe. See if you can find any tension in your shoulders, your neck, something that's weird. Breathe. You only want to be tense at the moment that you're touching the pillow or the target or whatever. Bam, and then as soon as I touch, I flex and I exhale. So it's gonna sound like this. And that's all we're doing. So let's go even further now. Let's talk about penetration and where we're hitting. When we're hitting a guy or a girl or whoever, I mean, make sure it's really like for a self-defense reason if you're hitting anybody. When you're hitting a person, you want to make sure that you're not hitting to the target, but rather you're hitting past the target. So if I'm out of range and I extend my arm all the way out and I'm only barely touching their face, there's not going to be much penetration on that strike. And so what I don't want to do is, well, if there's not penetration, I just say, oh, well, then I'll lean and then I'll get more. No. Try to make sure that your body is as erect as you possibly can make it. You want to make sure you maintain your stability. That's the key thing. There's nothing on the punch. There's nothing on anything if you don't have your stance correctly. Your stance stable. So you're throwing out, boom. You want to keep your back straight. Notice I'm not leaning backwards. I'm not leaning forward. And so for that reason, I need to be able to gauge my range first. So let's talk about gauging range. If I'm here, right, I want my guy to be basically about to the point where my hand, my fully extended arm is reaching out past the target by about a fist and like about a fist and a half. That's pretty good penetration in my opinion. If you're if they're any closer, you're going to be choked up and you're going to notice it's hard to like push them, and you're going to want to compensate for your opponent and try to lean back. That's no bueno. We want to make sure that they're here and you're able to punch through. So again, like I said, about a fist and a half. You want to have just a little bit of depth on it. Make sure they're there before you punch. If they're too far and you punch, it's not going to do anything. And then if you have to lean, now you're off balance. If they're too close, you're choked up and now you're off balance. So make sure that you can kind of gauge that. A good way to practice that, just to go and stand in front of something and practice hitting it. When you hit it, your elbow should be basically bent pretty much. And that if you can, if there's like a wall, you straighten it out and try to measure that about. You could usually feel if somebody's walking up to you, like maybe your mom is at home, your brother, your sister, your friends are over, and they're walking by you, or your kids, I don't know how old anyone is here, and they're walking by you, there's usually a moment where you start to feel like, oh, they're in my personal space. Not that you're uncomfortable or anything, but it's a thing that subconsciously we all notice. So right around there, that's where something is in your range. So you're taking this, play with different timings, generate your power from the floor up, and watch it come out like this, like a whip. Right? Or do it the other way, lead with your fist. If I lead with my foot, there's so much time that I'm projecting this punch that you can see in advance. So maybe I'll start by leading with my fist. And then this guy comes second. Boom, 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 boom. Now see, I little hyperextended my elbow there. You want to find an in-between. The perfect one is where you can find it, they're coming out at the exact same time. Out, in. Other side. Let me do this side so you can see both sides of the same punch. This is my right side again. My foot's going into the snow. All right, so that's basically it. Let's talk about really quick where we're gonna be punching dudes. So when we're punching somebody, you wanna, of course, think about different targets. Usually nose, throat, solar plexus, groin are good places, ribs. Find a place and practice looking at it while you're punching. Practice at first looking at that, making sure you keep your stance. Make contact, come back. Use a pillow, use a wall, use something. Make contact, come back. But then basically, once you do that, you should be able to be good at gauging where that target is in relation to your own body. In the mirror is the best place to do it. Practice with your ribs. Your own ribs at your own height, your own nose, your own solar plexus, everything. Once you do that, try to get in the habit of keeping your eyes high so that you know in relation to your body, you don't have to look at the target where you're throwing your punch at first. When you get good at that, keep your eyes up, keep your eyes at whatever you're looking at, throw it to low, boom, throw it to high, boom, throw it to middle, boom. But try to keep your eyes high. Notice I'm not coming up or coming down in my stance. I don't want to waste any energy turning my outward force also into upward and downward force for no reason. Keep a stance, keep it level, keep your head level, rotate in. I like to punch a little bit down on any target that I'm hitting just because I have a little bit of gravity to my advantage and it helps me, you know, get a little bit more oomph on it. But that's basically it. Pretty simple stuff. If you want to practice other things, just remember, always rotate your body and rotate your opposing shoulder with the punch that's coming out. So one last thing before we finish up is let's look at that really quick. Drills that you can practice. This is the classic karate drill. You start from here. Practice elbowing the guy behind you while you punch the guy in front of you. This opposing force is actually aiding this fist in coming out even faster and with more power. These opposing forces. This opposing force exists exactly the same when I turn here. I'm not just pushing forward on this side, but I'm also pulling back and rotating this hip backwards at the same time. This hip is going forward, this hip is going backwards. I do them at the same time. It looks like that. So, more or less, that's how you throw a punch. If we want to, we can make 3 2-hour videos about it if we really wanted to look at every single tiny detail about it. But more or less, this is what we're looking at. Make a fist, keep it sturdy. You know where on your fist to hit with. You know how to throw it out, how to bring it back. Practice the differences between thrusting punches are punches that go out and then come back. And snapping punches are punches that go out and come back really fast. Bam! They have different effects on the targets that you're hitting. A thrusting punch will probably move your opponent back or move whatever you're hitting back. This guy, the fast one, a snapping punch, will have high impact, but their body won't really get a chance to absorb it all, and they won't probably move back. There's just going to be a lot of localized pain in the area where your fist made the impact. Anyway, that's all we have for today. Take a minute after practicing this and just kind of meditate on it. I like to meditate like this, left over right. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Cool. Snow.